Yugi cheats a lot, like a whole lot, like here, or here, or here, or here. At this point, it's practically a meme. Yugi has cheated so much, he's gained a reputation for pulling off some of the most ridiculous rule-breaking plays. But the truth is, Yugi bends rules in almost every arc, and yes, even in movies. So today, I wanted to make the most complete breakdown ever made. Every illegal move, every contradiction, and even clearing up a few things that look like cheating, but actually aren't. So let's find out. Does Yugi really deserve the King of Games title, or is he actually the King of Cheats? We need to lay a few ground rules about what counts as a cheat. You can pause if you want to read them. The most important thing is that some of these are a bit subjective, so if you disagree, make sure to let me know in the comments. But starting off with Duelist Kingdom, home to some of the most prolific cases of Yugi cheating, we'll begin with Yugi versus Weevil. I'll also use this duel to lay out some of the weird plays that Yugi makes that aren't actually cheats. Starting off strong, just 2 turns into the duel, Yugi draws a card during Weevil's draw phase, which, you know, you aren't allowed to do. Weevil first attacks Dark Magician with his basic insect, but Yugi activates Mirror Force, and then Weevil's monsters get destroyed. Seemingly out of nowhere, Weevil loses 1445 life points. This might seem like a cheat, but in Duelist Kingdom, whenever a monster is destroyed by effect, the owner of that monster loses a portion of those monsters' attack and are destroyed. That being said, the amount lost is never consistent, as in this duel, Weevil should have lost 2035 life points, not 1445, but given that in this case it doesn't help Yugi, the way life points are taken away based on card destruction is also too arbitrary for me to definitively say if Yugi's cheating, so we won't count this as one. Another cheat that people consider one is Yugi activating Burning Land, which he uses to destroy the field. An aspect of Duelist Kingdom that not a lot of people realize is that a lot of the rules basically come down to how good at improv you are when coming up with card effects, so if something sounded reasonable enough, you could do anything. Akin to a game of D&D, but just like D&D, if Yugi's explanation for an effect is just too far out of the bounds of reality, I'm going to count it as a cheat. So in this case, Burning Land is as reasonable of an explanation you can give in destroying a field spell. Weevil attacks Gaia with Great Moth, and in response, Yugi activates Polymerization from his hand during Weevil's turn to fusion summon Gaia the Dragon Champion. So this is a tricky one, because on the one hand, spells are treated as quick play spells in Duelist Kingdom. There are many cases of this happening, so we know that this isn't a rule break. What's less justifiable is that Yugi activates Polymerization from his hand during Weevil's turn, which isn't allowed. I couldn't find any examples of other spells being activated from the hand, but the best evidence I could of this being a rule break is that Yugi actually summons Dark Sage, which has the effect of letting Yugi activate one spell from their hand during their opponent's turn, which implies that you couldn't normally, so we'll count this as a cheat. Yugi activates Maku the Magical Mist, which according to Yugi,
that's right, Magical Mist washes the field clean.
Which was important as Great Moth continually weakened Yugi's monster through the air. Okay, sure, I can see this working under the current applications of Great Moth's poisonous scales. Yugi also attempts to argue that Maku the Magical Mist boosts Summon Skull attack, due to it creating a thunderstorm, and the fact that Summon Skull has an electrical attack. This one is also fine, because weirdly enough, Summon Skull does attack with electricity. Moving on to Yugi's duel against Mako. On Mako's turn, he declares an attack on Yugi's Giant Soldier of Stone in defense position, and Yugi changes Giant Soldier of Stone's defense position to attack position, which counts as a cheat because you can't change your monster's position during your opponent's turn. And the next cheat is a controversial one. After Yugi changes Giant Soldier of Stone to attack position, this card attacks his spell card, Full Moon, to cause the tide to reverse and a water to reverse, leaving Mako's monsters all exposed from the water, which in turn makes them lose attack due to them being shored. And so Yugi's justification of this is,
as you yourself said before, Mako, it is the moon that controls the ocean's tides.
I'm actually going to count this as a cheat, and here's why. The main reasoning for this is when Yugi first activates Full Moon, the tide doesn't change at all. So on the flip side, if Yugi destroys Full Moon, there should also be no change in the tide. Next up is Yugi's duel against Ghost Kaiba. Yugi uses Spellbinding Circle on Kaiba's Blue Eyes, which causes it to lose 700 attack and prevents it from attacking or changing its battle position. Nowhere on the card does it state that the monster loses 700 attack, and so normally I would count this as a cheat. But because the anime consistently shows Spellbinding Circle reducing a monster's attack by 700 every time Yugi uses it, I'm not going to count this one. Yugi uses Mystical Elf to boost Blue Eyes' attack by 1100, but Mystical Elf is a normal monster, and Yugi's justification for this is pretty weak. So this one is definitely a stretch, and I'm going to count it as a cheat. An honorable mention is Kaiba hacking Blue Eyes, so it loses attack and eventually blows itself up through plot armor. Now, I'm not going to count this as Yugi cheating, because the entire effect is caused by Kaiba interfering with the duel, not anything Yugi does. Again, this is another controversial one. This duel takes the cake for quite possibly the biggest Duelist Kingdom nonsense. Yugi uses Spellbinding Circle to force Reaper of the Cards to attack one of Yugi's cards, which contradicts every other use of Spellbinding Circle. As I mentioned before, the anime always is shown to debuff the monster by 700 attack, and also prevented the affected monster from attacking, so that's a cheat for Yugi for just making up an effect on the spot. Panic swarms the Field of Darkness, which prevents Yugi from seeing what cards are being played, so Yugi uses Sword of Revealing Light to brighten the field. This one makes a lot of sense as it's in the name, so I don't mind it. What I can't let slide is Yugi's next move. He uses Swords of Revealing Light to prevent Panic from attacking for 3 turns, and then uses Catapult Turtle to sacrifice Guy the Dragon Champion to launch an attack on a flotation ring of Castle of Dark Illusions. And I'm going to count this as 4 separate points of cheating. The first is when Catapult Turtle sacrifices Guy the Dragon Champion. It boosts its attack by 600, which obviously Catapult Turtle doesn't do. And Yugi doesn't even bother giving it an explanation for, and Catapult Turtle never does this again in the anime, so I'm counting this one as a cheat. The second one comes from how after Guy's been fired at the castle, the only part of the castle that is damaged is the flotation ring on it, and absolutely nothing else. This makes no physical or logical sense, because for the flotation ring to be damaged means that the shield surrounding the monsters, the rest of the castle, or even the monsters themselves didn't get damaged, but only the flotation ring, which, might I add, the shield is what caused the monsters to be trapped under the castle, so we know the shield could be interacted with. The third cheat is Yugi's justification for why the Castle of Dark Illusions is still floating.
Now the only thing holding up your castle are the Swords of Revealing Light. And when this turn ends, each and every sword will vanish.
Which makes absolutely no sense, because if monsters are locked inside the swords, then how did the flotation ring fall before the swords expired? And for the fourth cheat, Swords of Revealing Light disappeared after 2 of Panic's turns, where it should have been for free. Even within the framework of Duelist Kingdom D&D rules, the reasoning for Yugi's attack with Catapult Turtle makes no sense, and it's just too egregious to let go. Also, what the hell is a flotation ring? I'm pretty confident that this is just a concept Yugi made up to justify this ass-pull of a win. By the way, if you're currently enjoying the video, why not subscribe to the channel? It helps me a lot and lets me know this is the kind of content that you want to watch. Next up is Seto's rematch against Yugi. Yugi activates Living Arrow along with Polymerization to fuse Mammoth Graveyard to Blue Eye's Ultimate Dragon, causing a decrease in attack of Blue Eye's Ultimate Dragon at the end of each of Yugi's end phases. So the actual act of Yugi using Polymerization to fuse Blue Eyes to Mammoth Graveyard is actually fine, as in Duelist Kingdom you could use Polymerization on any 2 cards to create a new fusion. And while I would have been okay with this, as the actual logic behind fusing a Pile of Bones to Blue Eyes works, what works less is Yugi's actual justification he gives. Except that Mammoth Graveyard is neither dark or a zombie, it's an earth dinosaur. And this is all based off the anime card, so because Yugi got both the type and attribute wrong here, I'm counting this as a cheat. I'm giving another cheat for Yugi using Living Arrow as well, because every time it's used, Yugi's reasoning is way too vague and changes every time. Here it allows him to use Polymerization on an opponent's monster. The next time it lets Yugi use one of Pegasus' spell cards after it had already been resolved. The next it reflected Bandit Keith's spell card back to his monster. So if how its usage does not line up at all with the card's effect, and how Yugi doesn't even justify how this works, I'm counting this as an additional cheat. In Yugi's duel against Mai, he doesn't actually cheat, and every single reasoning he gives is pretty solid. Here Yugi uses Catapult Turtle to destroy Mai's mirror wall, where even if mirror wall is a trap, Yugi's justification fits and makes sense. Mai's Shadow of Eyes forces Yugi's monsters to attack her, and Yugi plays Mystical Elf, which ignores Mai's spell as Shadow of Eyes only works on female monsters, which again makes sense here. For Yugi versus Joey's duel, Yugi only gets 1 cheat in this duel. Joey attacks with Thousand Dragon, but in response, Yugi activates Maki the Magical Mist, which blocks Thousand Dragon's attack by extinguishing the flames through the rainwater. It's a fishy explanation because the rainwater is shown only to affect outside of the castle, not inside, but I can see how rainwater can stop the attack of a fire-breathing dragon. Joey manages to affect Time Wizard's effect against Yugi, causing it to age the field, with this effect working on Dark Magician. But then we see that it never actually ended up working as intended, as now Dark Magician turns into another monster, the Dark Sage. This is much of an ass pull as you can get, and it's even worse when you consider Yugi gave this card to Joey. But the idea of a wizard with a millennial worth of knowledge, unfortunately for Joey, is an explanation that makes sense. Thank God. Moving on to our final duel in Duelist Kingdom, we have to evaluate in this arc is Yugi versus Pegasus. Like before, Yugi activates Living Arrow with a different effect from its written text, and the explanation doesn't work, so that's an extra count to the score. The only other potential cheat is the sequence of events where Yugi activates Multiply and Kuribo to create an infinite number of them, causing Thousand Eyes Restrict to blow up, which all makes sense. We're finally off of the massive rules that Duelist Kingdom brings, and we can enter the more concrete defined rules of Battle City, to a certain point. With this being said, it means that we're now judging Yugi's gameplay based off Battle City rules, so that means no more headaches of wondering what a flotation ring is, or why Maku has a different effect every time it appears on screen. We'll start off Battle City with the very first duel of the entire arc, being Yugi versus Seeker. Yugi goes through most of the duel without cheating, but for some incredibly bizarre reason, it seems like Duelist Kingdom Shenanigans are still in store, as Yugi makes up an effect where Alpha the Magnet Warrior gains 200 attack because of Summon Skull's electricity, boosting Alpha. The crazy thing though is that Yugi didn't even need to cheat here, because well, if Yugi wasn't a bum of a duelist and used a monster with the lowest attack to attack a defense position monster, he had enough attack to wipe out the Seeker anyways. So this is obviously a cheat, as Duelist Kingdom rules are off the table in Battle City, so any attempt at trying to logic your way through a random effect appearing doesn't work. The next duel is Yugi versus Arcana. Arcana activates Dark Magic Curtain to special summon a Dark Magician from his deck during his main phase, then proceeds to attack Yugi during his battle phase. Somehow, even after Dark Magic Curtain's resolution and an entire new phase change, Yugi for whatever reason is able to just activate his opponent's cards as his own to special summon Dark Magician Girl, which is a pretty clear violation of the rules. This move gives Yugi two cheats. For the first one, you can't just use the opponent's spell to special summon your own monster, and the second is that Dark Magic Curtain's card effect states that you can special summon Dark Magician, not just any spellcaster, so Yugi wasn't allowed to special summon the Dark Magician Girl here. The third cheat is when Arcana activates Ectoplasmer, a card which lets the turn player choose two types of monsters to be converted into ectoplasm, whatever that means. An opponent loses life points equal to the attributed monster's attack. Arcana attributes two monsters, so the first type, Fiend, which does inflict damage to Yugi, but then Arcana sacrifices his Dark Magician to deal damage to Yugi, which should have caused Yugi to lose the duel, but for whatever reason, Yugi's Dark Magician absorbs the damage which Yugi should have taken, which is just not an effect in the card. In Yugi's duel against Strings, we get a record number of times that Yugi cheats in a single game. Yugi says that Buster Blader gains 500 attack for each dragon-type monster in the grave. However, he also applies it to Slifer the Sky Dragon, but Slifer the Sky Dragon, despite its name, isn't a dragon type, it's a divine beast. Yugi puts Kuribo in defense position, which should have triggered Slifer's effect to decrease Kuribo's attack by 2000 and cause it to get destroyed, but Yugi justifies this by saying as Nightmare Steel Cage prevents attacks, it prevents Slifer's second math effect from activating. This is wrong. Nightmare Steel Cage only stops attacks, not any effects that destroy monsters. Probably the most egregious is Yugi activating Magic Cylinder and Spellbinding Circle on Slifer the Sky Dragon, which counts as two cheats here. Spellbinding Circle shouldn't work on Slifer, as we've seen Mirror Force not working on the Obelisk when it attacks.
Sorry to disappoint you, but Mirror Force will reflect Obelisk's attack right back at you.
I'm afraid that your weak trap card won't work.
Magic Cylinder negates and redirects Slifer's attack. While you could make an argument that this card doesn't affect the gods directly and affects their attacks, this again is inconsistent with the previous examples of traps affecting the gods. Yugi uses Brain Control to take control of Revival Jam, which is fine, but here Yugi cheats in two ways. First is that Slifer's effect gets procced when Revival Jam is on Yugi's field, but that isn't how Brain Control works. It simply just swaps the side of the field Revival Jam is on. It doesn't count as a summon, so Slifer's effect shouldn't have worked here. The second is that even if Slifer's effect does proc after Revival Jam gets destroyed, this card gets sent to Marik's grave, and when it hits the grave, Revival Jam's effect causes it to get special summoned back to Marik's field, not Yugi's. As Brain Control doesn't make you become the owner for the rest of the game. In Yugi's duel against Lumis and Umbra, he cheats a total of 4 times. Yugi activates Card Destruction, sending Beast of Guilford to the graveyard, which is fine. Its effect allows it to equip itself to a monster and lower that monster's attack by 500. What isn't fine is that Yugi never mentions this effect at all. He only reveals it after Blue Eyes attacks, which is obviously just cheating. You can't just hide an activated effect and reveal it whenever it's convenient for you. Yugi summons Valkyrion and Magnet Warrior by tributing the 3 Magnet Warriors, but the cheat comes from where Mask of Restrict is on the field, which doesn't let either player tribute summon monsters. This one is pretty egregious, as clearly on a Valkyrion and Magnet Warrior card, it specifically uses the word tribute. Lumis and Umbra even tried to call Yugi out on this, but he tries to justify it by saying,
That card only prevents us from sacrificing. But that's not the only way to summon powerful monsters, Umbra.
Which is just a cop-out, as it doesn't matter what you want to call it. Valkyrion's card effect states directly that you will be tributing monsters. Yugi uses diffusion on Valkyrion and Magna Warrior, but it's clearly not fusion, it's an effect monster in the anime, so this combo shouldn't have worked. Another cheat is that Yugi activates diffusion to summon a Magna Warrior's back, but they should have returned to Yugi's field, not Umbra's, which is crucial as Kaiba then used 3 tributes to summon Obelisk, giving them the win here. Up next is Yugi's duel against Joey possessed by Marek. Yugi uses Dispel to negate the effects of Graceful Dice, but this isn't how Dispel works. Dispel doesn't negate, it only destroys. So in this case, Yugi only would have destroyed Graceful Dice, but he wouldn't have been able to stop the effect of Graceful Dice from working. The second cheat is that the end result of the duel should have been a loss, not a draw, as Yugi's life points reach 0 first, and after this happens, the duel ends. And Joey wouldn't have been able to equalize his life points for them to reach 0 as well. In Yugi's duel against Kaiba in the Colosseum, we see Kaiba summon Obelisk, and then Slifer's second math effect activates, causing it to lose 2000 attack. This shouldn't have worked, as literally in the same duel, Obelisk's attack destruction effect doesn't work on Slifer, which is inconsistent with what we see here. Either Slifer's effect doesn't work on Obelisk, or Obelisk would have been able to destroy Slifer in this case. And there's no justification for why Slifer's effect works on Obelisk, but Obelisk's effect doesn't work back. So I'm going to count this as a cheat. Kaiba activates Flute of Summoning Dragon, and again Yugi gets to use his opponent's card out of nowhere, and uses it to summon Red Eye's Black Dragon, which obviously isn't allowed.
Where did that come from?
If you recall, you used your Flute of Summoning Dragon to summon your Blue Eyes to the field. But you may have forgotten that your flute works on my hand as well.
You can't use your opponent's card to summon your own monsters. Another thing to note is that during this duel, Kaiba activates Spell Sanctuary, a card which lets spells get activated during the opponent's turn, which implied that before, any time spells used during your opponent's turn, it was illegal. I've decided to assume that all spells being spell speed 4 was legal, mainly due to the overwhelming number of times this has been confirmed. And then for our finale in Battle City, I only managed to spot 2 cheats. Yugi sets a card without looking at it in the spell and trap zone, and I'm counting this as a cheat, because if it was a monster card, this would have counted as him misrepresenting what he had on the field. Yugi uses Ragnarok to banish his entire deck to destroy Winged Dragon of Ra, which again, destruction effects don't work on the gods, and this effect shouldn't have been able to destroy Ra. And in the case that you think Ragnarok does anything special, in the original show, Yugi explicitly says that Ragnarok destroys Ra. So this is a cheat. In the entirety of Virtual World arc, I could only find one single instance of cheating in the entirety of Virtual World, and that's in the tag duel against the Big Five, where Yugi summons Dark Flare Knight with Polymerization and attacks the same turn it summoned. In the anime during Battle City, fusion monsters couldn't attack on the same turn they were summoned, and so Yugi attacking with Dark Flare Knight was illegal. You could argue that as this wasn't in Battle City and in the separate arc, the fusion summoning restriction might have been taken off, and that maybe this rule didn't apply to Virtual World, except that we see Seto Kaiba using Quick Attack against No Kaiba, a card which lets fusion monsters attack on the same turn they are summoned.
And thanks to my Quick Attack magic card, I can attack right now!
Implying that any cases of this happening without this card broke the rules. Moving on to the Waking the Dragons arc, we'll start with Yugi's duel against Raphael. Yugi first special summons Kuri Babylon by using Kuriba as effect to banish the 5 Kuriba brothers from the field. Yugi then later activates Kuri Babylon's effect to remove it from play to special summon back the 5 Kuriba brothers. Later, Yugi then again activates Kuriba's effect to summon Kuri Babylon from the banish zone, but this actually was a case of Yugi cheating. Kuriba's effect only special summons Kuri Babylon from the deck, hand, or graveyard, not the banish zone. The only way this combo would have worked is if he runs another copy of Kuri Babylon in his deck, but this seems pretty unlikely, so it's a case of Yugi cheating. Dark Magician Girl the Dragon Knight gets destroyed because Yugi activates Seal of Our Calcos, but there's an effect that lets it return to the field after it gets destroyed, and so Yugi would have had an empty field after this. In Yugi's duel against the fake Yugi, he states that Divine Wind's effect inflicts any damage the opponent's monster's effect would inflict damage to you, doubled back to the opponent, but this is a flat out lie. It instead reflects any damage that the player would have taken onto the opponent plus 500. This duel is probably one of the most insane duels in the anime, where so many times Yugi just objectively breaks the rules, and this isn't even in Duelist Kingdom. Yugi activates Relay Soul, a card which lets him special summon one monster from his hand. but you lose the duel if the special summon monster is destroyed. The cheating comes from when he activated it. His life points reach 0 before the activation of this card, and as Relay Soul is activated after his life points reach 0, he would have lost the duel at that point, and wouldn't have been able to play any cards past this point. Just bear with me for this next combo, because it's incredibly convoluted, where I think Yugi cheats in almost every conceivable way here. Legendary Knight Critias attacks Divine Serpent Ge, but then Yugi activates the effect of Critias, letting it absorb the effect of Attack Guidance Barrier from his hand. Now Yugi can choose another monster on the field, and whenever Critias attacks or is attacked this turn, the attack will be directed to the chosen monster, and so Yugi chooses Hermos. And Hermos' effect is that whenever it gets attacked, its attack stat gets tripled, and then it gets reflected back to Critias. But since Critias has just been attacked, its absorbed effect activates again, reflecting it back to Hermos. And again, Hermos' effect activates, causing its attack to be tripled. This causes an infinite loop, where Hermos' attack reaches infinity. Tamais then activates effect, absorbing Critias and Hermos to special summon a Knight of Destiny, letting it absorb the combined attack of the 3 knights and attack and destroy Divine Serpent Ge. And within this entire sequence of events, I found a total of 5 cheats. The first is that Critias absorbs a card's effect from his hand, which he uses on Attack Guidance Armor. However, if we look at Attack Guidance Armor's effect, this shouldn't have worked, as it only works when an opponent's monster declares an attack, not when your monster attacks the opponent's. The second is that Attack Guidance Armor also requires a defense position monster you control, and so Critias wouldn't have been able to redirect the attack to Hermos. The third cheat is that obviously, your opponent cannot reach infinite attack points by stacking them over and over, as technically Yugi could have just let the attack stack continuously for a long time, but it always would have been a value substantially lower than infinity. Fourth cheat is how Hermos is even able to reflect the attack of Critias back in the first place. Yugi sends the 3 Magnet Warriors to the grave as part of Hermos' effect, but there isn't anything that explains how or what these cards are related to in Hermos' attack deflection, and seems to imply that it's due to them being magnets, which is a whole nother can of worms I don't want to deal with. The fifth and final cheat of this combo is that Yugi claims
Divine Serpent's strength may be infinite, but that's still not enough. For now, there's a force beyond infinity!
This just mathematically makes no sense to even attempt to claim, and is just untrue. For the only cheat in the Grand Championship arc, when Yugi activates Monster Reincarnation, he doesn't actually return Dark Magician to his deck. And for the final and last duel of the original series, we have Yugi's duel against the Pharaoh. For this, we will count both Atem and Yugi cheating as going towards the final count. The first cheat that will count is Yugi Moto using Ground Erosion on Obelisk, which Yugi tries to justify by saying that the trap affects the monster zone Obelisk is in, not Obelisk itself, which is extremely flimsy reasoning, and Obelisk should still be unaffected by this trap. The Pharaoh uses the effect of Slifer to reduce the effect of each of Yugi's Magnet Warriors after they all get summoned, but Yugi counters with Magnet Force, which he claimed to redirect Slifer's attack back to the 3 gods. This again is a cheat, as the Pharaoh states in his duel,
Traps don't work on Obelisks.
and so Magnet Force shouldn't have been able to redirect Slifer's effect. It also contradicts Yugi's earlier assertion that the second math ability of Slifer is an attack, not an effect, which Magnet Force implies. As this card directly states, if it's targeted by an effect. Magnet Force is also treated as a continuous trap, even though it's a normal trap, and stays on the field for longer than the turn, which again is a cheat. Slifer gets summoned through the effect of Summoning Clock, a card which lets him special summon monsters from your hand equal to the number of turn counters. This is all fine and well, but as we know if the gods are special summoned, then they are sent to the grave at the end of the turn, but this never happens in a duel. Yugi Moto activates Mirage Ruler, a card which returns all monsters destroyed this turn back to the field, and he returns Valkyrion and Silent Swordsman back to the field. Throughout the duel, Silent Swordsman has been gaining attack during each of Yugi's standby phases, so if Silent Swordsman was removed from the field, it would no longer have its boosted attack, and once Yugi summoned it again, it should have had 1000 attack again. Atem activates Monster Reborn during the battle phase, but Battle City rules no longer apply, and so the Pharaoh shouldn't have been able to activate a spell as a quick play. Yugi Moto activates Spell Textbook, which lets him discard his entire hand to draw 1 card into Card of Sanctity. The issue is specifically with Spell Textbook, as its effect states that you can discard all the cards in your hand, but given that Yugi has no cards in his hand, he cannot satisfy the requirements to activate it, and so this was an illegal move. Spell Textbook on a wiki does does have the if any clause, which would make it a legal play. If you take the literal Japanese translation of the card, it makes no mention of the if any. That is in the last time we see Yugi duel in the anime, as in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX he duels against Jaden, where he goes through most of the duel without cheating, except for one especially blatant combo. Jaden activates the card Code Change, which lets him change a type in a card effect to be any type of his choosing, which in this case was Heroes Guild, and then Yugi responds by playing Mystical Ref Panel, which I'll be giving 3 docs for. The first is that Yugi wasn't even able to activate Mystical Ref Panel, as the card text of Mystical Ref Panel requires a target of Code Change to be able to be applied to another appropriate target. So in this case, Yugi would have needed to swap Code Change's target to instead be card on the field other than Heroes Guild, which never were none. So the conditions to activate Mystical Ref Panel weren't satisfied in the first place. The second is that Yugi uses Mystical Ref Panel like a continuous trap card, and it stays on the field for the rest of the game. But Mystical Ref Panel is a normal trap, and should have been sent to the grave after Yugi activated it. And even on a card that he did end up using Code Change on, Yugi still used it wrong, as Dark Renewal's Japanese effect is this, and makes no mention of the type of monster in that special summon from the grave being Spellcaster. And if we look at the TCG version, its effect specifically mentions a Dark Spellcaster, which Yugi still cannot summon Slifer with, as even if Yugi used Code Change on Dark Renewal, he could then only summon a Dark Divine Beast monster, not a Divine Beast monster. Another cheat I found in this duel is when Impact Flip sends Beast of Gilfer from the deck to the grave, and then during Yugi's turn his Dark Magician attacks Elemental Hero Blade Edge, and only when Jaden attacks into Dark Magician does Gilfer's effect get shown. Again, like before, Yugi's hiding knowledge from Jaden until the last possible moment, so this counts as a cheat. Moving on to the big screen, we'll start with Pyramid of Light, where Yugi gets attacked and drops all his cards. You can see for a brief moment that he loses 2 copies of the Winged Dragon of Ra and King's Knight. The movie novelization confirms that he only has 1 King's Knight, and obviously there's only 1 copy of each god in existence. It almost definitely is an animation error, but still counts as a cheat. On Yugi's final turn, Yugi has done some switcheroos of his own, as he's shown to draw a diffusion wave motion, but out of nowhere he activates Double Spell,
I activate Double Spell.
which he was never shown to have at any point before this, and his hand was also empty. This also isn't really a cheat. When Yugi uses Kaiba Return from a different dimension, he mentions that Kaiba wanted a perfect victory,
When Kaiba spoke of dealing me the perfect defeat,
which
he
was
meant
fine,
right-
except for the part that Kaiba never said his power out loud, he only thought it.
No, I wanted a perfect victory.
Almost definitely a continuity error, but it is funny to think that Yugi was reading Kaiba's mind the entire time. For Bonds Beyond Time in Yugi, Jaden and Yusei's duel against Paradox, Yugi commits a sort of half cheat here. Jaden activates Flute of Summoning Kuribo, letting him add a Kuribo or Wing Kuribo from his deck to his hand, but instead, Yugi adds Kuribo to his hand, which under tag team rules, if an effect would special summon from the deck or add a card from the deck to the hand, the currently acting player performs the effect using their own deck. So as Yugi was the one who activates Flute of Summoning Kuribo, it would be him getting Wing Kuribo from his deck, not Yugi. There's a couple problems with adding this to the cheat counter though, as Jaden was also just as complicit in this cheat, as he's the one who's activated it. And while I'm using the official rules, there's nothing guaranteeing that the anime rules also use them, so I won't count this one.
So with that all being said and done, Yugi cheats 56 times.
But there's also another thing I want to point out, and it's that at the end of the ceremony duel, Shizu makes this comment.
You're wrong. You see, the Pharaoh didn't predict what his next card would be. His willpower made it so.
Which makes all these duels like here, or here, or here, or here, extremely suspect, as Yugi is basically able to cheat any card he wants to the top of the deck. We see multiple times him just drawing a card without looking at it, and already knowing what it is, which means that in every single duel, in every single draw, there's always the question of, did Yugi cheat this draw out? But you might say, an anime drawing cards is technically a skill, which sure is true, but what Yugi did was the equivalent of using steroids, given that he used an ancient Egyptian artifact, which gave him access to millennia-old spirit who can literally manipulate fate and even duel for him, which in my personal opinion definitely counts as cheating. After all, it basically means that whenever you're dueling against Yugi, you're technically dueling against 2 different people. So to answer the question I asked at the start of the video, how many times does Yugi cheat? Given that he duels with the Pharaoh in basically every duel, the real answer is simple. Yugi's cheated in every single duel. And if you want to see why Yugi cheats so much, it's because his entire deck makes absolutely no sense. So click on this video on the right to see why Yugi's deck was so bad that he had to cheat in basically every duel to win.